Survivor Specialist John and McKenna are back, and we are ready to leave this episode in the past. But before we leave it in the past, we have to talk about the past. We are rewinding episode 4 of Survivor 46.
McKenna, this has been a very... I can't even say this has been a divisive episode of Survivor, because I think it's landed on the negative side of the spectrum from most fan response here. How did you feel about it?
Not my favorite, because, you know, as everyone has said, the last half hour meant nothing. I liked it when, you know, we thought they might win a challenge with the reward, but, you know, it plowed, and we see them go to tribal council.
I think the most astonishing thing about this is how handily they won that reward too. Yanu came out strong, and they were able to finish the reward before any other tribe finished the section before the last part of that reward challenge. So it kind of gave you hope, and I actually really enjoyed the first hour of this episode. I felt like we were finally getting some more content. We were finally kind of getting an idea of what was happening on these other tribes. They were showing the other tribes enough to the point where I was like, okay, maybe one of these tribes is actually going to tribal council.
No, it's because we don't have a strategy talk.
Yes, and that's really what it comes down to, which, you know what? At least the editors did that. At least the editors did give us other content rather than showing us the same tribe we've seen for the last 3 episodes.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
but as soon as that immunity challenge was over, I was just checked out of the episode.
We don't need. So we had a little bit of a struggle with today's live show, but we're here. We did it. We found our moments, and we're going with our outwit first, as usual. And we are going to talk about voting out your closest ally so you can bring them in closer. So this is referencing Hunter, Tevin, and Soda, where Hunter's okay with Soda going because that is Tevin's perceived other ally. So, you know, he's going to bring Tevin closer so he has Tevin on lock.
Yeah, this is a strategy I think that is talked about in Survivor a lot, and other strategies that are talked on this podcast a lot are liking this video and subscribing. So go ahead and do that if you made it this far already. We really appreciate it. But talking about voting out someone's ally to bring them closer, I think is something that is out there in the realm of Survivor strategy that's talked about, but isn't executed a lot.
Or it's executed never, like, I know we talked about it here before a swap or before anything happened. Like, we usually don't get that until, like, later on in the game, rather than, like, right here in the pre-merge.
Yeah, and especially not before a tribe has actually gone to tribal council. Because that's the most astonishing thing here. We've seen it earlier this season, right? With Q talking about Kenzie and Tiffany, and how Kenzie going home really brings in Tiffany closer to him. But what we're seeing differently with this Hunter situation is, we haven't really spent enough time with Nami to know exactly what these people are thinking, especially Hunter, who I know we had the segment last week, which really showed his strategy of, like, laying low a little bit and just kind of being the provider type. Whereas if you look at it for what he brings this episode, all of a sudden we finally get strategy talk from him, and it's like, I wanted Soda God anyways, which was hinted at in the premiere, but this is the first time we've actually heard Hunter really vocalize any type of direction he wants to go in the game.
Yeah, I agree. So I said that it mainly happens kind of later on in the game, and that's one moment that I'm going to be talking about. I'm going with Heroes versus Villains with Russell, Parvati, and Danielle, where Danielle spills the beans and she's like, well, Russell, Parvati and I are closer than you think. And Russell's like, oh, okay. So the trio of them were working together, but to make sure he had Parvati, he voted out Danielle before some of the heroes.
Okay, is this Parvati and Russell's demise in Hero versus Villain? Is this the move that really prevents them from being able to win this game?
Because they have Sandra at the end instead of Danielle, yes.
So I know we don't really want to delve into like alternate timelines and everything, but it's a very interesting thought experiment to have here because that composition, not only is this Russell, this is probably one of the worst moves Russell made in Survivor history, in my opinion, simply because it not only, yes, he's bringing Parvati in closer, which does in fact guarantee his trip to the end, but what it also does is it pushes Danielle away from him as a jury. It again goes to show how bad Russell is at jury management.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about this is that these three people have been working with each other since the beginning of the game, essentially. And now, all of a sudden, Russell is only aware of how close they are because they literally tell him.
I know. Yeah, he had like suspicions that they were close because he was like, Danielle's going after you, Parvati's going after you, and Parvati is like, well, I'm just going to go ask Danielle, and he's like, don't do that because I'm going to be caught in my lie. So he had some suspicions, but Danielle confirming it at tribal council just sends Russell through the roof, and he can't handle the two women working together because he needs his own like individual person, and he thinks that that's how he's going to win. But realistically, that opened up a spot at final tribal council for someone else to win it when all three of them played the same game. It's if all three played a different game. Like if it was like Rupert, Sandra, and Parvati, you have more of a split. I mean, Rupert's a bad example, but you have more of a split vote here because they all played different games rather than Sandra being the single one that played a different game to the other two. He needs Danielle in that Sandra spot so it could be a little bit more even across the board and there's no clear target, like clear other.
I think that's one of the hardest things about playing Survivor, though, is being able to identify who you can win against in the end and overestimating who you think you have a better game against rather than risking diluting votes by sitting with people who have, the same game as you. It's tough. But in this instance, I think the bigger thing here is yes, it locks Parvati into working with Russell till the end of the game, but it doesn't really make them closer at all.
No, it just really limits Parvati's options.
Which I guess
they were limited to begin with. But
yeah, and it is kind of the essence of what we're talking about here anyways, especially the way that Hunter's addressing it where, hey, Tevin's like super social and stuff, and so is Soda, and they seem to be connecting really well. So I don't really want them to be connecting well because I want Tevin to myself because Tevin, especially, I think it's very different in Hunter's case because Tevin is bringing that opposite part of the game that Hunter acknowledges he doesn't have. Hunter acknowledges he doesn't have this strong social game and that he needs someone to help anchor that. And he needs Tevin using that social game for him and not for someone else who is also a social player.
Yeah, exactly. John, do you want to get into your example?
Yeah, I do. It's a post-merge example because this isn't a conversation that usually happens. If it does happen pre-merge, we don't see the fruits of it until later in the game. But in this case, it's a little different because in this instance, I'm going to be talking about the LJ boot in Cagayan, where Tony really tries to switch the target to LJ. And this is after, Tony gets a bunch of votes at tribal council, so he's kind of freaking out. LJ is also this really strong player, had a hidden immunity idol, played it. So there are these reasons why he can kind of push the vote onto him. He's leaning that way. But what ultimately puts him over the top with this is LJ and Trish have been connecting so well because they've gone on the beach together because they come from the same area.
Yep.
And arguably, Tony doesn't win this game without Trish.
No.
Trish is so important to Tony's game, not only as a sounding board for his ideas, someone who's calming him down, keeping him cool, and not letting him just be crazy all over the place, but also just as someone who is his guaranteed number. Despite the fact that Tony's kind of flip-flopping back and forth between the sides that he's voting out, Trish is that one solid number he has until he eventually votes her out. Mm-hmm. And then Trish also kind of gives him this layup question at the end of the game in Final Tribal Council. So this was really a real smart move by Tony, because I think if LJ's still there, would Trish flip on Tony? I don't know. But is there more of a possibility if there is another strong player who has a deeper connection on a personal level with Trish? I think it's kind of likely.
Yeah. You never know what can happen in the game. Like, one crazy Tony move could drive her into the arms of LJ. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like I said, it's not quite the same, because Tony was kind of already thinking, let's get rid of LJ because, hey, he's a threat. He's someone. LJ probably is one of the better players on that season, which is wild because there are a lot of very, very good players on that season. But he has that personality that people are kind of attracted to. Tony has a personality that can kind of drive people away from him unless you're already gelling with him. Whereas LJ is the type of magnetic personality that brings people in. So taking away that option from Trish to make it so that, like, hey, I know there's this charismatic young guy over there who you connect with because you grew up in the same place and everything. I can't let him be here because I need you. It's not just a threat analysis. It's a resource analysis in a way, it sounds terrible to talk about people in the game as a resource, but a lot of the times when you're a Survivor player, the other people in this game are a resource for you. It's how you progress. We talk about Survivor as a solo game. There's a single winner. It's a game you have to play by yourself. After the merge, it's an individual game. But you have to be able to play with people in order to win Survivor.
Yeah. Survivor is beautiful that way, where you have to work with people, vote them out, and hope that they vote you back. And so this move by Tony to get LJ out could end up in his favor, because that could also be a nod, oh, you were a threat to my game, and boost a juror's ego too.
Yeah, exactly. This is something that I think, and again, I think it's talked about a lot in Survivor, and we talk about it as Survivor fans a lot, this idea of bringing people closer by eliminating their options. Especially, I think, after, Kim wins One World, literally saying, I have so many options. I think she says the word options in every single episode. That's so I think we as Survivor players kind of, and Survivor fans, fear the options for other people. And we want to limit options.
Yes.
And that's what we're starting to see in 46, though we can't see it because this tribe can't go to tribal council.
Yes. So unless you have anything else more to say about our outwit moments, we're going to go to outplay, which, is straying away from like the typical outplay, but I feel like this is really impactful for the challenges, which is tree mail. And we see two moments of tree mail, not just one. I feel like in some past seasons, we've gotten like a glimpse at one tree mail, but I think because this episode was so straightforward and not shot for 90 minutes, yes?
That's correct. Yeah, the season was not shot. CBS had not approved 90 minutes at this point. A lot of that is because, hey, they didn't know that there was going to be an ongoing writers and acting strike at the time of recording. I believe the writer's strike had just started as they were filming this season, but we don't even get the green light for Survivor until much later into the year anyways, right?
So they have a lot of time on their hands to be able to show tree mail. So we get these 2 tree mail moments, and the moment we're really highlighting is Siga reading that tree mail, and Maria's just like, I know exactly what this is. We're going to be jumping off the platform and trying to smash the bricks with a hammer or just grab a key. And Mo is just beside herself because she can't jump. And so Charlie takes it upon himself to practice jumping with Mo. And so that moment of interpreting tree mail and then being able to practice leads us into some moments. And John, I would love for you to talk about yours first because it is what the thumbnail is. We will now be explaining why we put Tammy, Sue Hawk, and Mo on our thumbnail.
So one of the biggest things with tree mail, and because tree mail has been less frequent, obviously it's still going out there. Every challenge, these players out there are getting tree mail. But because we don't see it as much and we haven't seen it really at all in the new era, the one thing is the practicing of challenges based on assumptions. You have to make assumptions. And we've seen people practice for challenges all the way back to Borneo. And granted, I'm kind of taking a little bit of a cheat maybe on this one because I want to specifically talk about moments where the tribe is provided with the materials that they're going to be using in a challenge. In Borneo, we're talking the weapons challenge in episode 5 of Borneo.
You mean the episode that we're watching over on the Patreon?
Yes, that's right. McKenna convinced me to watch another episode of Borneo for the Patreon. So if you like,
honestly, I tried to go other ways too, but I feel like our pickings were a little slim.
They were, but honestly, it's a really good old classic episode of Survivor that really outlines how Borneo is very different than modern Survivor. But in that episode, Jeff Probst walks up and nails tree mail to a tree. And then's like, hey, here's a slingshot, a blowgun, and a spear. Have it.
Yep.
It's just one of those instances where, and we've had weapons challenges in Survivor lots of times. There was one in all the first 3 seasons. There's one in Amazon, which we see a lot of with like the use of the bow and arrow and everything.
Pearl Island had the blow dart.
Yes, I think so. It's slingshot challenge.
It was the kill shot.
Right. And we've seen these type of things over and over again. I guess the biggest different type of way to approach that, we could go to Marquesas, where we see the stilts. And they get the pair of stilts, and everyone sucks at stilts, and Tammy wins an immunity challenge just because, hey, she happened to stay up on these tilts more than ever, and no one actually competes in the challenge in this episode.
I'm pretty sure in that episode, she kind of walks off to practice the stilts or like is like, all right, I'm good at the stilts, so I'm just not going to do it in front of everybody else and then beasts and wins because nobody can do this still.
I don't know if you can call it beasting if she happens to make 3 steps and no one else can. But going back to the Borneo example, the practicing was so much part of that episode where we get that entire segment of Toggy realizing that Rich is really good with the slingshot for some reason.
He's an expert marksman. But like, how would they know that beforehand? Sean's just like, wow, like we just figured out Rich is an expert marksman. And I'm just like, what other moment could you
I don't know where you find out that someone is really good with a slingshot, but that's it. And then it's Sean who does the blowgun in that, right?
Yeah.
So Sean's like blowgun, and Sue's like really good with a spear, and we see Sue doing all of these spear throws and hitting targets left and right. And then we like switch over to Bagong, and we see, Jenna is like okay with a blowgun, right? It was Jenna, yeah. And then we get the segment of Joel not being good with a spear. And I think like the most iconic moment of the segment in Borneo is Sue being like, you know what, I'm pretty good with a spear. I just kind of want to dog a guy on national television.
Yeah, that is amazing. And it is interesting when they get things in tree mail and kind of have to interpret what it could mean. Like this one is a little bit more direct, but you have things like even what the tree mail looks like. In Micronesia, when we watched that for the premiere last season, they got like a ship, got like a puzzle wheel with all, so they know, oh, we're going to be doing a puzzle. This one was obviously a little bit more direct with like, hey, you need 3 people to do these weapons, but we see practicing for challenges in Cagayan with Luzon because they don't want to lose another challenge, and they're tossing water into coconuts.
Yeah, I honestly, they probably have enough time that like practicing for challenges gives survivors something to do as they're killing time and trying to prolong their life in the game. But the way we see it in 46 is so different than we've seen practicing for challenges. Because I think this is one of the only instances where we have seen someone be like, I literally can't do this. And then they actually show that they literally cannot do it. Because Mo can't jump. I'm sorry, Mo. Like, if you're listening, I hope you've learned how to jump. But I was actually in awe at how much this woman could not jump.
See, I was like in solidarity with Mo because I can't really jump that high either. But I'm like, oh, I can jump a little bit higher than that, though. I was like ready to be like, girl, me too, like non-jumping queens. But no, I got a few more inches. But yeah.
And I will say I was a little disappointed when we actually get to the challenge. And they don't actually have to jump at all.
I know. They just have to jump off of something. It's not
literally could just run straight and you're fine. There should be enough momentum there that you end up in the water and not hitting anything below you.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to pivot over to my tree mail moment. And I always think it's fun when they get face paint in the tree mail. So I'm going to reference everyone's favorite seasons in Thailand, All-Stars, and South Pacific. First we're gonna go Thailand. They're in their tree mail. They have several colors, and they've got to deck out their bodies in these colors and arrive to what they think is the challenge. And then they get to talk to the corresponding members of the other tribe with their face paint on. And I thought this was just such an interesting way to have people interact and give out information or not give out information when the whole game is going on. Like, it's a different way than a summit or the sanctuary, where they have similar color face paint and all right, great, you're talking now.
Yeah, and this is the first time it has been the entire tribe. This was the first time it emerged where it was the entire tribes talking to each other too, right?
Well, so they half did it in All-Stars too, but it was like you got to pick from the opposite side who you wanted to talk to or something like that.
Right, but it was ordered in All-Stars.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about this Thailand one is they weren't given instructions. And in fact, it kind of leads to one of the biggest confusions in Survivor history, where they believe they're merged because they're living on the same beach, but they're not, because Jeff never said the word merge. And I really like this because nowadays, these type of moments are really artificially enforced with, say, journeys, where there's some choices and stuff that go into it.
Yeah.
But we've also seen over the last several seasons that people cheat on how to get onto journeys with their rock selections or their stick selections so that they always know when they can go. But this was something you couldn't cheat at all, right? Like, you're like, here's paint yourselves. Everyone gets a different color. Figure out what it means later.
Exactly.
And it could literally mean anything too, right? Like, it doesn't have to be, hey, you're going to be paired with the person who has the same color on you. Maybe
it could have been like, you're at that station for the challenge or whatever. Like,
I think Survivor's kind of gone away from body paint, but maybe it's time to bring it back.
Yeah, because now we're going to go into All Stars, where we have another kind of hilarious body paint moment. And it's when Shapira gets all decked out in their red paint. They got the red paint and tree mail. And then Mogo Mogo just brings it with them because they don't know what to do with it.
And this is a really interesting thing to contrast to, because this goes to show how vague tree mail can be sometimes. Mm-hmm. Although I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, this tree mail very much outlined what they were supposed to do with this paint.
Yeah, it might have just been in more artistic words than like, hey, paint yourselves. You're going to war, you know?
Yeah. But there was no reason for the painting of themselves, though, right? Like, it didn't do anything in the challenge, if I recall correctly.
Fun, like, I feel like more of a morale booster than anything.
Right. It's interesting, though, because is there a benefit in waiting after reading a tree mail rather than assuming what something is in a tree mail?
I think, if you're assuming that you're jumping off things and you can't jump, practice. Mm-hmm. Like, I doubt they would be like, all right, here's this paint. And not say don't touch it until the challenge. So like they've gotten things like a pig in tree mail or a dummy in tree mail, and it's like, all right, you'll need this for your challenge, bring it to the next challenge. It would have said like bring these paints to the next challenge, and then it's for the challenge, not for our bodies.
Yeah, exactly.
And then my last moment is from South Pacific, one of the episodes we have watched over on the Patreon. It is the one with Jack and Jill, and where they have to paint themselves to be twins. I think this is just a fun little aspect of the challenge. Yes, it is tying it into the promotion of Jack and Jill because twins, but it's just a different way to like know who is partnered with who and how they're tackling the challenge.
Yeah, this is I mean, like you said, it's the promotion of Jack and Jill, which if you want to see Phil and I talk Adam Sandler movies, the cinema specialist covered an Adam Sandler bracket the other day. No, Jack and Jill was not part of it.
On it,
no,
John?
it was not. We refused to watch that movie still. But this is an interesting way to pair off, because I think this tree mail was a little more. I think you can really assume what this tree mail is making you do when it says, hey, make sure people are painted the same way. I think you can assume it's going to be a pair challenge there. And I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, they pair themselves quite well because of it, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they partner themselves so it's not like strong boys together and, weaker people, because Cochran is on the season, weaker people together. So like Cochran is with Jim. You have Whitney and Ozzy, or Whitney and Keith. I forget. And then so they're very much strategically paired.
Yeah. So I think this is an instance of the opposite of what we saw in All Stars, where there was not enough interpretation. This is one where there's no room for interpretation.
Yeah, exactly. I just like when they get things in tree mail and how they interpret what's going on. So like in this episode of 46, when they're like, all right, there's got to be jumping. So it was just fun to see them with tree mail and talk about tree mail, and just something that we would do as castaways. We get to see it with the current ones.
Yeah, it's nice. It's honestly, tree mail does give it, as much as like there's condemnation of this episode and everything, it's nice getting these old school moments in this new era.
So don't forget, become a patron. We're $10 and $20 patrons for our rewind. So become a $10 or $20 patron. We'd also like you to become a $5 if you can't do a 10 or 20. But we will be watching episode 5 of Borneo, pulling your own weight over there. So just go do that after you.
And while you're at it, like and subscribe to like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Yeah. All right. We're going into Outlast, and we are talking easy boots.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is really as much easy boots as it is predictable boots. Right. But like we said earlier, as soon as Yanu lost this immunity challenge, there was no question who was going home.
Do you want to highlight that one of the most recent chats there?
This one?
Yeah, that one. Remember,
Brendan in and out is coming in clutch in all of these live chats, reminding everyone to like and subscribe. So thank you, Brendan. We appreciate it quite a lot.
Yeah, so predictable boots, kind of where you get to the scramble session and it's just like, all right, and can we get to tribal council now?
And this is really interesting because I think the awkward thing about this predictable boot in this episode and why people are so negative about this episode is because we kind of saw everything last episode.
Right.
And because of the random medevac, we kind of had to go through the motions again with Banu. Yes, it changed. The circumstances changed a bit. And obviously, Yanu knew more about what Banu was saying and wasn't saying. Mm-hmm. And we kind of saw them be more forthcoming with Banu about the fact that, yeah, it's definitely you.
Yeah.
Which I think lines up more with where we're going with Outlast this week.
Yeah, exactly. It would have been interesting, though, had they brought them to tribal council and Jeff said Randon was medevaced.
Mm-hmm.
Because then would Banu have his vote this episode?
That's a very good question.
Went to tribal council and he didn't vote at his next tribal council. Like,
that, I think honestly probably why they didn't do it.
I know, but that would have made it for a better episode now.
It would. And I mean, that really goes into the conversation that Phil and Blake had on Digging Deeper this week, where they were talking about is the loss of votes leading to less drama in Survivor. If you haven't checked that out already, make sure you do. It was a good chat. But I don't know. I kind of went a little more negative with this one. You went a little more positive with this one, McKenna. Maybe we start with mine so we can end on the more positive note.
So I also don't know. Did you watch the Amazing Race recap that Phil and I did last night?
Not all of it. Why?
Because Phil was talking about how he likes podcasting about the Amazing Race because everything is so positive.
Yes.
And podcasting about Survivor with Will, it could be kind of negative. And I was like, you have a Will and I have a John.
Yes, that is true. But
if you want to watch the Amazing Race recap, we did that yesterday. Sorry.
That's true.
So many points.
But I'm gonna go back to Ko-Rong. And I think that people kind of forget how much of an obvious boot this one was because something bigger happens in this episode. But it's the Alicia boot in Ko-Rong. We're at that point where we've seen the Braun tribe lose a bunch of immunity challenges, and it's time to vote out their third person already in the game, and it doesn't go well. The reason why, like, you might be stretching to think, wait, when does this happen? It's the same episode where Caleb's medevac. So there's so much that happens prior to this moment of them going to tribal council, but in the end, I think why this kind of relates to the Banu of it all is
because there was a medevac and a tribal council that should have happened with the last one.
Yes, but also more importantly, because man, this Braun team ragged on Alicia so hard. They were so mean about this, and where it really, really connects with this episode. Maybe you remember this, McKenna, but in the tribal council, it becomes very apparent that Scott, Kyle, and
Sydney
are all voting for Alicia.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeff asks, hey, we can just do this here. Like, verbal vote out. All of you consent to it. We can just do it here. Get this over with. And Alicia refuses.
No, I want to be voted out of the game. Like, I don't want to be just like escorted out. I mean, in this case of 46 is a little bit different because Banu doesn't have a vote to do, so they can just verbally vote him out and not go through the rigmarole. But like, that just sucks to not be technically voted out of the game.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is the correct way to approach this, especially because you don't know what everyone has. In this, and again, with Banu, him not having a vote means whatever. This is just going to be a 3 votes on Banu. You can't use your shot in the dark. There's no point. With Alicia, there were no shot in the darks, obviously, in Go Wrong. There's technically the potential of an idol, except the audience, already knew she doesn't have an idol.
Right.
But more importantly, we see fight. And I think that's the big difference between Alicia and Banu, and why Banu losing his vote for this vote, like this tribal council, is really unfortunate, because Banu doesn't even get a chance to fight for himself here.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think that if the Purple Tribe, if Yanu watches Go Wrong, they know kind of what would happen if they kept Banu a little bit longer, because I feel like they decided to get rid of Jen.
Yes, I think so.
It starts with a J. Jen, Jess, something like that. They get rid of her, and when they originally want to go, Alicia, and that's kind of like the Kenzie of it all, where they wanted to try and get rid of Kenzie and keep Banu, but they still go to tribal council anyway. So I feel like they were saved a little bit with that random medevac, where they realized, let's just get rid of Banu.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I know there are a lot of people in response to last week's episode who were saying Banu shouldn't talk about the fact that he lost his vote. There's no reason to tell everyone he lost his vote, but there is on a tribe vote for it, because you need 2 people to vote with you. And
for a tie, at least.
Exactly. Well, yes, for a tie at least. You also just don't want to like leave one person who's willing to work with you hang out there to dry, right? If you just go on to this and be like, oh yeah, I totally have my vote, and Banu's just telling that to Q, and then Q's like, cool, I'm going to vote Kenzie. Tiff decides not to, and then all of a sudden Banu can't even vote, so you don't even get into a tie situation.
Yeah. So my Outlast moment here, we're going with Dan Barry, aka Dan Fuego. He was the predictable boot for the Lamina tribe once we saw that Sally gets saved and sent to exile, saving her from the vote. And the guys basically get back to camp, and Dan is pleading for Terry to be like, hey, are you going to keep your word? We're like rock solid, you and me. And Terry's like, I don't think I can, because we need the strength. And Dan does not have the strength. So there is a little bit, Dan does put up that fight that Banu tries, but it's more of like a, hey, let's honor our deal, rather than I'm on the ground groveling.
Yeah, I mean, and Dan's appealing to Terry in this moment in order to like get it, but because it's a 4-person tribe, because Sally's off on exile and just isn't going to be there, it becomes a tie at best situation, and it makes no sense for Terry to go along with that. But the big difference between this moment and the Banu moment and the Alicia moment is the amount of respect this tribe has for Dan Barry.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if the website still exists, but Phil did a whole like spiel article on how the Dan Barry boot like changed the course of Panama. Like everything would have been insanely different had Dan not gone home. So I don't know if that still exists somewhere on the internet, but it is a fun read. I think Dan going here and that tribal council is so like moving. Panama is one of my top seasons. I think this is just an overall amazing season. And such a fun watch, and having this like emotional tribal council in the pre-merge where you don't really have a lot of gripping moments within the pre-merge. I feel in older seasons, some people are a little bit more forgettable. So to have Dan here, it's kind of just this heart-wrenching moment that he's like, my torch is getting stuffed tonight.
Yeah, it's it's an interesting moment, and it's
not
it's
forced
actually
like Banu. Banu's is just so
no.
forced. It
Yeah.
feels so much more natural because like the tribe is saying it instead of like Jeff wanting to get the moment for TV.
Well, and they all like salute him and everything too, right?
Yeah.
Like it's actually a really touching moment for those who haven't
Mhm.
revisited Panama in a long time.
So good.
It's so good, and I think that's kind of the disappointing thing with 46 this week is that we don't. It just feels like the rest of Yanu was really tired of Banu, and I get that. I feel like
Mhm.
from what we are shown as an audience, I get how Banu could be a very frustrating player to play with, especially once he starts groveling and begging on his knees and things like that.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But in the end, we talk about the niceties of Survivor a lot. In fact, it's been a point of contention in a lot of the new era seasons where like everyone's just too nice to each other.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's nice to have those genuine moments and not just feel like everyone's sick and tired of everyone.
Yeah, it's nice and it's also nice to have those genuine moments when they feel genuine, because I feel new era Survivor tries to force those heartwarming moments upon us when they can very much just happen naturally.
Yeah, and this feels like a casting decision. When it obviously like with Bond being cast on the season and all, but it feels like they want these artificial moments where I think we as an audience want more genuine moments. And that's where I think like there's a contrast between what happens with Banu at the end of this episode and what we see from Tevin in this episode. Where Tevin's just like talking about his experience of fishing with his dad and like learning how to gut a fish, and then that is his dad passing and it being that moment to honor. I mean, yes, like we get it in a confessional, but we also see him talking to his tribe about it as he's like saying, hey, I want to gut these fish. I want to clean these fish. And that feels like such more a natural moment than what we get from Banu.
It comes up as naturally as because they win the reward. They have those fish, and it's like integrated within the storyline. Like Sally leaving to go to exile was integrated within the storyline, so they had this moment where they could, be real with Dan rather than like Banu out of nowhere feeling where he's just like, save me.
Yeah, and again, it just helps that there wasn't an entire episode leading up to Dan Barry going home.
True. Yes. Well, I think that's everything we've got. So make sure to watch Borneo and listen to that podcast over on the Patreon.
That podcast will be on the Patreon, along with so many other things you can get on the Patreon. Obviously, we have Phil's after show. There's Every Season Matters, I believe, is just starting to move into Marquesas now. There's the casting perspective with Blake. There's Will's still finishing his New Era rewatch over there. We have the Cinema Specialist $5 Tuesdays. There's so much available to you on the Patreon, so please consider becoming a patron. It really is worth it, and you get access to the Discord, and you can just join this community who loves talking about Survivor and other things. This week, though, we have a full slate once again for you. Join Phil and Will on Sunday as they sit down with Bruce for the power predictions and power rankings this week. That should always be good. It's always great having Bruce on the podcast. Monday night, Phil and I will be taking the Cinema Specialist onto our last March Madness bracket. This time we're looking at 90s nostalgia films and 90s nostalgia sports films, to be specific. So if you're craving for those good old days where the underdog wins and you're learning how to be a team, Monday is the podcast for you. Tuesday, Phil and Will will be back recapping Deal or No Deal Island, episode 5. Wednesday, of course, there's the episode 5 recap after the episode airs, and the Phil and Will show will happen at some point on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, McKenna and Phil will be talking The Amazing Race episode 3, and Phil and Blake will be back with Digging Deeper, and then you wrap it all off with us here on Friday next week, where we will do a rewind for episode 5. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Once again, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel so you know when all of this content is coming live. and we'll see you all next time.
Goodbye.